I didn't stop because he was old. I stopped because no one else did. His hands were shaking, his coat too thin for that kind of cold. I gave him my scarf and kept riding. The next day, he sent a car. Turns out, I hadn't helped a stranger. I'd helped a man who owned half the city, and my fate. Before we dive deeper into the story, tell me, where are you listening from? And don't forget to subscribe so I can share more heartwarming stories with you tomorrow. Baltimore in February bites through cheap coats and good intentions. Wind slides off the harbor and knifes up Pratt Street, rattling bus shelters and making the streetlights hum like old fluorescent bulbs. At 10:43 p.m., Bernice Lavender leans into that wind on a second-hand bike with a milk crate zip-tied to the back and a lemon-yellow mop handle poking out like a flag. Her palms are raw inside dollar store gloves. Her knees click. Her breath ghosts. She's already missed the last bus. She's already late to pick up Charles from Miss Alma's basement apartment on Lexington, again. She promised herself tonight would be different, no overtime, no extra floors, no saying, "Yes, sir," when the day supervisor asked if she could just hit the lobby glass one more time. But the lobby glass always shows fingerprints, and Rent does not care about promises. Her phone buzzes where she jammed it into her coat. "Miss Alma, baby's fine. He fell asleep on the couch. I'll keep him till you come." Then a second message, from a number saved as Mr. Collins, "Night lead, clocked you out at 10:30. Don't be late tomorrow. We need the mezzanine done before the clients arrive." Bernice noses the bike past a puddle turned to black ice. The chain chirps. The harbor smell, brine and diesel, wraps her throat. She mutters to the air, "Almost there, Charlie." Mommy's coming, and pedals harder, feeling the empty snap in her stomach that means she forgot to eat the sandwich she packed. That's when she sees him. At the bus stop by the shuttered pawn shop, a man stands alone under a flickering bulb. He's got on a thin, camel-colored coat that's more suggestion than warmth and a scarf that's come loose, one end dragging a wet, gray loop in the slush. He's old in the way hands tell on you, knuckles like river stones, fingers bluish at the tips. He holds a crumpled paper in one shaking hand and peers up and down the street, searching faces that aren't looking back. People pass. They always do. A couple in black peacoats keep their laughter tucked inside like something expensive. A delivery van fishtails, rights itself, and coughs on. A teenager with a hood tight to his cheekbones skates by on silence. Bernice coasts, foot down, one boot sole scraping grit. Don't stop, the math in her head says. Miss Alma has her own life. Charles has school in the morning. You have a 6 a.m. call time and a supervisor who counts seconds like nickels. The man's lips move, a whisper dragged thin by the wind. He looks at each oncoming headlight like it might call his name. She pushes the pedal, meaning to go. 2 turns of the wheel, 3. Then the picture lands and won't move, the scarf trailing like a surrender flag, the paper rattling, the hands. Her mother's voice, soft and steady as a metronome she hasn't heard in years, "If you see somebody alone like that, you stop, Niecy. Don't cost you anything to be decent. Cost the world if you ain't." Bernice brakes. The back tire skids, corrects. She swings the bike around and the wind punches her front like it's mad she changed her mind. Up close, the old man's eyes are washed winter blue, startled, watery, eager to recognize and failing. Up close, the coat is nicer than it first looked, just not built for Baltimore's mean kind of cold. Up close, his lips are chapped to the point of blood. "Sir," she says, voice gentle, palms open where he can see them. "You okay out here?" He blinks, like the question has to fight its way through fog. "Bus 23, he says, papery and careful. "Willow." Willow Hill. I think I missed it. The paper flutters, she sees a looping hand that once wrote confidently and now trembles at the period. Bernice glances down the length of Pratt. The city answers with nothing. The transit app died on her last month. She knows without checking, the 23 hasn't come for an hour and won't again till morning, not to this stop, not on this schedule, not for him. How long you been waiting, she asks. He looks at his watch, then chuckles at himself when his sleeve shows a bare wrist. I'm not sure, he admits. The chuckle turns to a cough that scrapes his chest. It takes too long to end. He sways. Reflex kicks in before the math can speak. Bernice unwinds her scarf, the soft gray one Charles calls the cloud. The wind slaps the heat from her neck and she sucks a breath, then loops the scarf around the man's. Here. Tuck it in like this. She folds the ends under his coat, mitting his hands in her own for a second to make the tuck hold. His skin is shocking cold. You don't have to, he says, worried for her, which makes her want to cry for no good reason. It's all right. She makes it sound like she believes it. Willow Hill's a ways. You live up there. A pause, then a nod that seems both certain and surprised. Yes. I believe so. What's your name, sir? She asks it like you ask a child you're guiding gently back to themselves. He blinks again, searches, and finds a foothold. Kevin, he says, and then, as if offering a password, Peebles. Kevin Peebles. I'm Bernice. She tips her chin toward the bike. This isn't a taxi, but it's what I've got. He looks at the crate, then at her, embarrassment and gratitude doing a careful dance. I don't want to be trouble. Too late. She tries a smile. Trouble's already met me. The joke lands enough to warm his mouth into something like a grin. She angles the bike so the crate faces him. You think you can sit? I'll go slow. Real slow. He hesitates only as long as pride needs to pretend, then places the paper carefully in his pocket and grips the crate. She keeps one hand on his elbow until he's settled, and then another second longer. Hold on to the sides, she says. And if you get cold? I am cold, he says, a little wonder in it, as if he's remembering what cold means. If you get colder, she corrects gently, you tell me. Bernice pushes off. The chain complains. The front tire finds a rut and climbs out. The city rolls past in a string of little dioramas, a cat in a bodega window, a hand-lettered sign that reads we cash checks, a wreath still up in February, its ribbon gone gray. Wind needles her ears. Her fingers go dumb and then mean. She keeps her back straight and wide, making herself a windbreak for Kevin because she can. Behind her, the crate creaks. He hums under his breath, a tune that might have been a hymn once and might still be. At the corner, a car's horn startles too loud and someone shouts something careless out the window. Bernice rides the wobble and keeps them upright. People don't stop, Kevin says into her coat's collar, the words catching on the threads. Most do what they can, she answers, because she wants it to be true. They turn left toward the long incline of Guilford. The street goes quieter, houses taller, ironwork finer, the kind of Baltimore where the snow is pristine because nobody's had to ruin it with footprints. Somewhere, a wind chime sounds like glass breaking in slow motion. How far is Willow Hill, she asks. Kevin is silent long enough that she thinks she's lost him to the fog again. Then, past the old stone church, before the houses give up and the trees begin. He says it like a map that's remembered in the bones, not the brain. All right. Church, then trees. Her thighs burn. Her lungs burn. The night eats minutes in big bites. She thinks of Charles on Miss Alma's couch with the crocheted blanket up to his chin, one sock always halfway off. She thinks of his small hand patting her cheek awake in the morning, whispering, "You came back." Eleanor used to fuss about scarves, Kevin says suddenly, voice bright for a second with a name. Said I never tied them right. The brightness dims. He tips his chin toward the papered dark. You remind me of, the sentence skids and fractures, like his mind hit black ice. He frowns as if the rest of it ought to be right there if only he could pick it up. Bernice wants to hand him the word he's reaching for. She settles for, she sounds smart, and keeps pedaling. At the crest of the hill, the road levels and widens. The wind drops, as if they've stepped into a pocket the city forgot to punish. Off to the right, a white stone steeple shoulders up out of bare trees. The church. Good. Bernice lets them coast, gives her legs a small mercy, and watches the street names turn fancier, Argyle. Beecham. Willow. She nearly misses it because the sign is half snow and the letters were the years, but there it is, tacked to a post behind a row of hedges, Willow Hill RD. The hedges break to a gate, tall, white, flaked with age, ivy working the seams. As the front tire rolls past, a motion light snaps on. Another flares farther up a drive so long it could be a thought. Kevin's hand tightens on the crate. Something in his posture stands up inside the thin coat. He is still an old man, but for a second he is also someone else, a figure who knows gates and motion lights and drives with their own weather. Bernice puts her boots down. The bike rocks to a stop. The wind hushes like the city got respectful. Is this it? She asks, throat tight with a surprise that feels too big for her chest. The house at the end of the drive is mostly suggestion, a geometry of warm windows and dark eaves behind trees, but it has that look some places have of being sure of themselves. Kevin's eyes shine wet in the glare. He nods without looking at her, like one nod could jostle the whole night loose. Home, he says, half to the gate, half to the memory fastening itself. Then softer, like he's testing the word for cracks, home. A second light blinks on, nearer now, and the front door opens somewhere too far to see who stands inside. Bernice swallows, sets her feet, and feels the cold discover the skin under her borrowed bravery. She clears her throat. Sir, do you know the number? Which one is yours? He doesn't answer that. He leans forward instead, eyes fixed on the glow up the hill, and whispers the same phrase that got him here in the first place, only now it sounds like a spell broken open. Willow Hill, he says, the wind carrying it like a secret. I think I found it. The motion light hums. The gate creaks. Somewhere farther in, a shape moves, someone coming, or some truth. And then, with the night holding its breath between them, Kevin Peebles turns his head toward Bernice and, grasping at a thread his mind refuses to let go, murmurs, I think I missed the bus. She looks up the long drive, at the house that glows like a promise she doesn't trust, and feels the clock and the cold and the whole city press hard. Her hands are shaking and not from weather. Sir, she says, voice low, steady, ready to carry him one more inch if that's what it takes, is Willow Hill, your home? Kevin blinks, and behind the fog something old and rooted opens its eyes. It was, he says. It is. The door at the top of the drive swings wider, spilling more light onto the snow. Bernice grips the handlebars, draws one long breath that tastes like iron and hope, and nudges the front wheel toward the gate. Okay, she whispers. Let's go home. And from behind her, carried on the wind like a memory trying to finish itself, she hears him begin a sentence that will not finish tonight, you remind me of. The wind pushed harder once they passed through the gate. It swept over the hill in restless gusts, carrying with it the smell of salt, pine, and something faintly metallic, like the air before a storm. Bernice leaned into the handlebars, boots scraping for traction on the slush as she coaxed the old bike up the long drive. The front wheel slipped twice, but she held steady. Behind her, Kevin Peebles sat hunched on the crate, one gloved hand clutching the bike's frame. His breathing came in soft bursts. Now and then he murmured, half memories, half apologies. "I told Eleanor I'd fix the light by the porch, can't remember if I ever did." Bernice didn't answer at first. Her thighs burned, her fingers numb to the bone. She could have left him. That thought kept repeating in her head like a song stuck on loop. She could have looked the other way, told herself it wasn't her business. But then she thought of Charles, her son, asleep on Miss Alma's couch, clutching his stuffed bear. She thought of what she'd tell him tomorrow. Mama saw a man who needed help, and she rode on. She couldn't live with that version. So she kept pedaling. "Almost there," she said through chattering teeth. "See those lights up ahead?" Kevin nodded, eyes fogged with age and confusion. "Looks like Christmas." "Let's hope they're friendly," she muttered, forcing a smile he couldn't see. Halfway up, the wind died for a heartbeat, and she caught the faint sound of waves from somewhere beyond the hill. Then another sound, a dog barking once, far off, then silence again. "You said your name was Bernice?" Kevin asked. "Yes, sir." "Pretty name. My wife would have liked it." She glanced over her shoulder. "You mentioned her before. Eleanor, right?" He blinked, the name catching him like a thorn. "Yes. Eleanor. She had a way with tulips. Every spring she'd fill the yard. Said it made the house look alive." His voice softened. "When she passed, the tulips didn't come back." Bernice's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He looked at her profile, the strength in her jawline, the grit in her eyes. "Don't be. Life takes its due. Then, after a pause, you remind me of her." Bernice turned her head slightly, but his gaze was lost again to the dark trees lining the drive. When the path leveled out, she stopped to catch her breath. The estate loomed ahead, a mansion of white stone and glass, 2 stories high, every window glowing gold like a lantern against the snow. It looked like something out of another life, another planet. "Sir, are you sure this is the right place?" Kevin stared up at it, tears pooling in his eyes. "I built this place," he whispered. 40 years ago, when my hands still remembered work." The front door opened before she could speak. A tall man in a gray overcoat stepped out, confusion etching his face. "Mr. Peebles," he called. "Where on earth? We've been looking all evening." Kevin straightened in the crate, pride flickering like an old pilot light. "Found my own way home," he said weakly. Bernice dismounted, her breath visible in the porch light. The man hurried down the steps, Charles Rivers, she'd later learn, Kevin's driver and assistant. His eyes flicked from Kevin to Bernice, then to the battered bike with its wobbly crate. "Who are you?" he asked, suspicion edging his tone. "Just someone who didn't drive past," Bernice said. Kevin touched her sleeve. "She helped me. In the cold." Rivers' shoulders softened, but only slightly. "Thank you," he said stiffly. "Mr. Peebles has had some episodes lately. You've done us a great kindness." Bernice shook her head. "I didn't do anything special." The man pulled a thick coat from his arm and wrapped it around Kevin. "Let's get you inside, sir." But Kevin wouldn't move until he'd pressed Bernice's scarf back into her hands. "Keep it," she said, pushing it gently back to him. "You need it more than I do." He smiled faintly. "You sound like Eleanor." Rivers guided him toward the steps, but before disappearing inside, Kevin turned. "You have a son, don't you?" Bernice blinked, startled. "Yes, sir." "Tell him," Kevin said, voice thin but sure, "that his mother is a very brave woman." And with that, the great oak door shut behind him, swallowing the light and warmth. Bernice stood at the foot of the stairs, snow settling on her shoulders, the hum of her bike's chain ticking like a clock. For a moment she couldn't move. She stared at the mansion, its windows, its clean edges, and wondered what kind of world could hold both her life and his. Then she exhaled, long and shaky, and started walking the bike back down the hill. By the time she reached the main road, her phone buzzed. "Miss Alma again, Charles woke up asking for you." "He's fine, just tired." "You coming soon?" Bernice texted back with stiff fingers, "On my way." "Tell him mommy's okay." The night swallowed her again. Streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks. The scarf was gone, her neck burned from cold, and her heart thudded with exhaustion, but something else sat beneath the fatigue, a strange, quiet warmth. As she turned onto Pratt Street, the wind shifted, carrying a faint scent of tulips, impossible in February. She smiled without knowing why. Then, as if the city wanted to remind her of its nature, her phone chimed again. "Unknown number, Ms. Lavender, this is Mr. Collins. We need to talk tomorrow morning. Immediately." Her breath caught. She could almost hear the tone in his voice through the text, trouble. Bernice's smile faltered, the tulip scent gone. She looked once more toward the distant hill, where the mansion lights still glowed like watchful eyes through the fog. "Maybe I should have kept riding," she whispered. But deep down, she knew that night had already changed everything. By the time Bernice reached Lexington Avenue, the cold had turned mean. It crept under her sleeves and down her spine, a thin-bladed knife working for bone. Miss Alma's building wore the same tired face as the rest of the block, brick flaking like old makeup, a lobby door that stuck at the top so you had to lift while you pulled. The light over the buzzer was burned out. It always was. She chained the bike to the railing and knocked in their pattern, 3 quick, 2 slow. Inside, bolts slid, a chain clinked, and Miss Alma's soft eye appeared in the crack before she let the door swing. "'Bout time, baby," she whispered, not unkindly. "Cold's got old hands aching." Then she smiled, stepping aside. "Your boy's a snorer." Charles lay curled on the thrift store couch, one sock half off, mouth open, a thread of drool glistening like glass. Someone had tucked the crocheted throw under his chin. He clutched his yellow bear to his chest as if the world couldn't pry it loose. Bernice's lungs emptied with relief she didn't have breath for. "Thank you," she said, meaning it heavier than the words could carry. She knelt, kissing the warm spot above his eyebrow, that tiny ridge that had been there since he was born. He stirred, eyelids fluttering, then settled deeper. She let her fingers drift through his hair. "I'm here, Charlie. I'm here." Miss Alma handed her a chipped mug. "Not coffee," she said. "Tea. And don't argue. Your bones are knocking." Bernice wrapped both palms around the heat, took a careful sip, and watched steam lift into the room's quiet. The clock over the stove ticked smugly. "Thank you," she said again. Miss Alma limped back to the stove, rubbing her hip. "Man texted," she said, side-eyeing. "Said he needed to talk immediately." Sounded like a man who can't find his empathy with both hands. "Mr. Collins," Bernice murmured. "Night lead." The tea wasn't strong, but it steadied her. "I'll fix it. I always fix it." "Sometimes the world breaks what it can't bend," Miss Alma said. "Sometimes it bends when you don't expect." Then she wagged a spoon. You hungry? I'm okay. Her stomach answered with a dull, hollow clench that argued otherwise. She set the mug down, careful not to wake Charles. I need to get him home. Miss Alma studied her a beat. You look like someone who gave away a scarf. Bernice almost laughed. It came out as a shiver. Maybe. Then take this one. Alma tugged a thick, ugly green scarf from a hook and looped it around Bernice's neck before she could protest. Ain't winning no pageant, but it's warm. Bring it back when spring remembers us. Bernice hugged her with one arm. You're a saint. I'm a woman with sense, Alma said, opening the door. Go on. Before the cold remembers your name. They walked home through a city that had yanked in its shoulders. Bernice carried Charles in that awkward way mothers do when the child is bigger than your arms admit, the yellow bear squashed between them. The green scarf smelled like lavender and dust. Snow ticked against her cheeks. Somewhere a siren started and faded, uninterested in whatever small grace moved down Lexington and didn't make noise. Their building's hallway tasted like damp plaster and someone else's dinner. Mrs. Thompson kept the heat low and the rent high, a combination that felt like a lesson. Bernice shifted Charles to one shoulder, dug for her keys, and lifted them toward the lock. They didn't fit. She frowned, leaned in, tried the angle she knew by heart, the jiggle, the tug, the wrist twist at the end. The key met metal and stopped like a word cut off. She tried the second key, then the third, desperation knocking under her ribs. No, she breathed, not loud enough to wake the floor. No, no, no. A white square flapped on masking tape at eye level. In black marker, fat and final, rent late. Lock changed. Her mouth went dry. The hall light buzzed above them, flicker flicker, as if it were trying to apologize. She pressed her forehead to the door, careful of the sleeping weight on her shoulder. Please, she whispered to wood that didn't care. Mrs. Thompson. It's Bernice. Please, can we? Floorboard sighed inside. The distinct small clack of someone choosing not to step closer. I'll have it Friday, she said, a confession to paint. I got stuck tonight, please. Silence settled in around her like snow. Charles stirred, breath hiccuping. Mom. She swallowed the shards and made her voice soft. It's okay, baby. She kissed his temple again, the motion steadying her because it had to. We're having a sleepover. Adventure. She set him down gently. He rubbed his eyes with a fist, the yellow bear dangling. Where? Miss Alma's, maybe. Or, she looked down the hall at options that weren't options. We'll figure it out. Her phone buzzed. The screen lit her face bluish. Mr. Collins, night lead, call me now. She stared at the letters, each a small ice chip. She breathed once, twice, and pressed call. He picked up on the first half ring. Lavender. Mr. Collins, You left the mezzanine undone. There was a situation. An older gentleman needed. I don't pay for situations. I pay for floors that don't squeak when a client breathes. You clocked out early. You clocked me out, she said before she could swallow it. Sir. A beat of dead air. When he spoke again the voice was a thin wire pulled tight. Bring in your badge and uniform tomorrow. HR will process your last check next week. Her mouth opened. Nothing sensible came. Please, she said finally, not liking the taste of the word, hating it more for how true it was. I've never missed. Not once. Just, give me tomorrow. I'll do double. I'll. The decision's made, he said, already bored. We can't keep people who don't follow directives. Midnight is not philanthropy hour. Then, as if tossing a tip, good luck. The line clicked and left her holding a piece of glass that suddenly weighed too much. Charles watched her face change and tried to smooth his hair with the hand that wasn't clutching the bear. Mom. She put the phone in her pocket like it was evidence. Then she knelt so they were eye level and the hallway's flicker softened his pupils. Hey, she said, voice sugar over gravel. Guess what? Pancakes in the morning. His mouth tilted. You promise? Cross my heart. She drew the cross with a gloved finger over her coat. Miss Alma will let us use her pan. We'll make the kind with the little burnt edges you like. He leaned into her, the small press of him a lit coal against the night. Okay. They gathered what they could from the grocery bags she'd stashed by the door earlier, a pair of jeans, 2 t-shirts, the homework folder with a crayon rocket on the front, the picture of Bernice's mother smiling the way you smile when there's no camera. Everything else, pots, the thrifted clock, the plant that refused to die, stayed behind the lock that didn't remember them. Back at Miss Alma's, she tucked Charles on the couch again. He fell asleep fast, trusting the world to keep its end of the bargain because she always had. Bernice stood in the doorway a long time, watching the rise and fall of his chest under the crocheted hills. The clock counted. The tea mug on the counter had gone cold. She stepped into the stairwell and let the door click behind her. The city's breath rose through the building like a draft that couldn't find where it began. She sat on the top step, set her elbows on her knees, and covered her face with her hands. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, but because she'd already spent those coins. The body has budgets. It keeps them. Her phone buzzed again against her thigh, the vibration a small animal. She pulled it out, expecting Mr. Collins's aftershock, or the quiet cruelty of an HR template. The screen showed a different name, Tisha, Night Crew. Girl, you okay? Heard Collins is heated. Bernice's thumbs hovered, then tapped, I'll manage. Lock got changed. The typing dots bubbled, stopped, bubbled again. He told day shift you stole supplies. Said inventory off by a box. He's calling loss prevention in the morning. The stairwell's hum seemed to grow fangs. Bernice blinked slow, once, as if that could reset the sentence into something kinder. She typed, what? I didn't take anything. Ever. I know, Tisha answered. But he's saying he has notes. Be careful. They might bring the cops to make a point. The phone felt slick in her hand. She pressed it to her knee until the case squeaked. Her mind spun through corridors, brooms and closets and cameras that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't, a supervisor who counted seconds like nickels and would spend a person as quick. Down the hall, a door opened and closed, somebody's keys making wind chime sounds on a belt loop. Somewhere outside, a siren started again, closer this time, then faded like it remembered another appointment. She typed, thanks for telling me. Then, because the words were stronger than she felt, truth will hold. Tisha sent a single red heart that looked, in the cold blue glow of the screen, like something living. Bernice leaned her head back against the cinderblock wall and stared up the stairwell shaft where a square of winter sky pressed itself into the building's throat. Her breath made ghosts that climbed toward it and broke apart. You did the right thing, she told the ceiling, her mother, herself. The words didn't echo. They just sat between her and the chill and waited to be believed. On the couch inside, Charles turned in his sleep and murmured something about pancakes. The sound made her smile despite the teeth of the night. Her phone buzzed one more time, this time a number she didn't know, a local area code. It vibrated, stopped, then immediately buzzed again with the persistence of someone who expects to be obeyed. She let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text slid in, clean and sharp as a paper cut. This is loss prevention. Please confirm you'll be available at 9 a.m. for an inventory interview. Failure to appear may result in police involvement. Bernice stared until the letters blurred. Then she locked the screen, put the phone face down on the step like a stone on a lid, and listened to the building settle. The wind found a crack under the stairwell door and hissed like a secret. In the room beyond, her son breathed easy, while down in her pocket, the threat pulsed again, bright as a siren she couldn't yet outrun. Morning came without warmth. The sun rose pale over the Baltimore skyline, a tired coin slipping through dirty glass. Bernice sat on Miss Alma's couch with Charles still asleep beside her, the thin blanket tangled at his feet. Every bone in her body ached like she'd wrestled the night itself. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her mind had spent hours rewinding the call, the message, the threat. Police involvement. The words hung in her skull like storm clouds that refused to break. At 8:12 a.m., her phone vibrated again. Loss prevention, please confirm you'll be available at 9 a.m. for an inventory interview. She typed back, I'll be there. Miss Alma watched her tie the ugly green scarf. You sure about this, baby? If I don't show, they'll say I ran. Sometimes running is just surviving. Bernice gave a thin smile. I can't afford to look guilty. She kissed Charles's forehead. Stay with Miss Alma till I come back. I'll bring pancakes. He mumbled something about syrup, still half dreaming. Outside, the cold had teeth again. The walk to Harbor Clean Services took 30 minutes, long enough for her resolve to stiffen into something that almost felt like courage. Inside, the office smelled of bleach and old resentment. Evan Price, the manager, sat behind the counter, chewing a toothpick like it owed him rent. He didn't look up when she entered. You're early, he said finally. Guilt'll do that. I came because I was told to. He smirked. That's new for you, doing as you're told. She ignored the jab. Where's HR? Busy. He leaned back in his chair. We'll handle this right here. I'd prefer a witness. You don't get to prefer. He opened a folder, tapping the papers like a judge about to read a sentence. Inventory from last night, 1 box of cleaning concentrate, gone. Security camera facing supply closet, conveniently turned off between 11 and midnight. You were on shift. I didn't take anything, she said evenly. He shrugged. That's what they all say. Her fingers curled tight around the strap of her purse. You know me, Evan. I've been here 2 years. You've seen me stay late, work doubles. He cut her off with a lazy flick of the toothpick. What I see is someone who thinks being nice makes them untouchable. You left mid-shift to play nursemaid. Maybe you figured you deserved a bonus bottle on your way out. Bernice's jaw tightened. That's not what happened. Then explain it. She told him about the old man, the bus stop, the cold. Every word felt smaller as she spoke it, like truth shrinking in a room that didn't want it. When she finished, Evan gave a long whistle. You expect me to believe you ditched your shift for some random grandpa in the snow? I didn't ditch it. I helped someone who could have frozen to death. You helped yourself to company property, he snapped. That's theft. The door creaked open behind them. Harold Green, the store owner, stepped in, coat collar dusted with frost. His eyes, kind but tired, shifted between them. What's going on here? Evan straightened fast. Loss prevention case, sir. Missing product. Aha. Harold walked past him, resting one hand on the counter. You file a report? Almost finished. Harold looked at Bernice. Miss Lavender, you good? I didn't take anything, she said. He studied her face for a beat too long, then turned to Evan. Show me the footage. Evan hesitated. Cameras were off. Then how do you know who took it? Evan stammered, caught mid-lie. The log shows her ID last scanned at. I checked that log, Harold interrupted. Her ID didn't scan. You clocked her out manually. Color drained from Evan's cheeks. She was leaving anyway. Or maybe you thought no one would notice a missing box if you made someone else the story. Harold's tone dropped low and quiet, the kind of tone that made truth feel heavier. Evan's mouth opened, then closed. Harold nodded toward the security office. We installed a new camera near the loading dock last week. Covers the hallway now. Let's see what it caught. Minutes later, the screen showed a grainy corridor. 11:42 p.m., Evan Price appeared, glancing around, then shoving a box into a black duffel. He paused, adjusted his tie, and walked out. Silence filled the room. Bernice stared at the monitor, disbelief cracking into relief. Harold folded his arms. Seems like our thief isn't who you thought. Evan's voice broke. That's not. Save it. Harold turned to Bernice. You're clear, Miss Lavender. I'll file the correction myself. She exhaled, the air leaving her body in one long tremor. Thank you, sir. Harold reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded 20, and pressed it into her palm. Get breakfast for that boy of yours. And, he hesitated, I'm sorry for how this was handled. Bernice blinked hard to keep the tears back. You don't have to. I know, he said softly. That's why I am. She walked out into the daylight with the 20 clutched tight, the world both heavier and lighter. The cold felt different, like it had stopped trying to punish her. Halfway down the block, a sleek black car pulled alongside the curb. The window rolled down, and the man inside spoke her name like it wasn't the first time he'd said it. Miss Bernice Lavender. She stopped. Yes. The driver, Charles Rivers, wore the same gray overcoat she'd seen the night before. Mr. Peebles would like to see you. She froze, heart kicking. I'm sorry, what? He nodded toward the back seat. There, folded neatly beside a leather briefcase, lay her gray scarf, the one she'd given to Kevin. Bernice's breath caught. The driver's tone softened. He asked for you by name. She looked back at the building, Evan's face in the window, pale and small, and then at the car door waiting open like a new chapter. Where? She asked quietly. Willow Hill, the driver said. Snow flurried across the hood, catching in the sunlight. Bernice hesitated just long enough to feel the weight of everything she was leaving behind, then she climbed in. As the car pulled away, the reflection in the glass showed Evan standing in the doorway, watching the woman he tried to break disappear into a world he could never enter. And somewhere at the top of that hill, Kevin Peebles waited, remembering the janitor who stopped when everyone else walked past. The car climbs toward Willow Hill, and Bernice whispers to herself, what does a man like him want with me? The car climbed the hill in silence. Snow hissed under the tires, the sound steady, hypnotic. Bernice kept her eyes on the window, watching Baltimore slide away, row houses, laundromats, cracked sidewalks, all dissolving into a blur of white and gray. She didn't ask questions. She didn't trust her voice not to betray how frightened she was. Charles Rivers, the driver, handled the wheel like someone born to discipline. His gloved hands never twitched, his posture perfectly upright. Now and then, he glanced at her in the mirror, maybe to confirm she hadn't changed her mind. "You don't have to look so nervous," he said finally. "Mr. Peebles doesn't bite." "I don't visit people with gates and guards," she murmured. "Then this'll be a first for both of you," he said, but his tone softened. When they reached the top, the mansion came into view, more alive in daylight, every window throwing back the sun like polished mirrors. The snow on the steps had already been cleared, leaving crisp stone paths that glowed pale gold against the winter light. Charles stopped the car at the circular driveway. "He's waiting inside." Bernice's fingers trembled as she reached for the door handle. "Should I knock?" Charles smiled faintly. "You helped the man home in the dead of night. I'd say the door's already open." She stepped out, her worn boots crunching the snow, and followed the scent of burning wood to the entryway. A maid in a navy uniform opened the double doors before Bernice could lift a hand. "Ms. Lavender?" "Yes. Mr. Peebles is expecting you." Inside, warmth swallowed her. The air smelled like cedar and cinnamon. The floors gleamed with an impossible shine, the kind only money and time could buy. Bernice felt the stiffness of her janitor's uniform against the opulence around her. The green scarf Miss Alma had given her looked like a weed in a rose garden. She followed the maid down a hall lined with oil paintings, portraits of men in tailored suits, women in pearls. At the end, in a sunlit room with floor-to-ceiling windows, Kevin Peebles sat by the fire. He looked different. Not lost, not fragile. The confusion that had clouded him last night was gone. His posture was straight, his eyes clear and deliberate. The same eyes that had searched the empty street now seemed to hold the whole city in focus. "Bernice," he said softly, smiling. "You came." Her heart skipped. "Mr. Peebles, you remember me?" "How could I forget," he said, rising slowly. "You're the reason I made it home." She shook her head. "I just gave you a ride." "You gave me more than that." He gestured toward a chair. "Please. Sit." Bernice obeyed, perching on the edge like she might break something. Kevin studied her, taking in the uniform, the weary lines around her eyes. "You work nights?" "Yes, sir. 2 buildings downtown." "Or I did." He frowned. "You did?" "I lost my job this morning," she admitted, voice brittle. "My supervisor didn't like that I helped you." Kevin's face hardened. "He punished you for kindness?" "I guess kindness doesn't count as company policy." For a moment, Kevin said nothing. The fire popped, throwing sparks that reflected in his eyes. Then he asked, "And your son, Charles?" "Yes. He's well." Bernice nodded, startled. "You remember his name?" "Of course. I don't forget what matters." He looked into the flames. "You know, for weeks I've been drifting. People around me speak in worried tones, call doctors, talk about medication. They treat me like I'm made of glass. But that night, when you stopped, I felt something I hadn't in years." "What's that?" "Seen," he said simply. The word sank deep, the kind of word that lingers long after the sound fades. He turned toward her fully. "Bernice, may I tell you something?" "Of course." "I wasn't lost that night because of my memory." "Not really." He smiled sadly. "I walked out. I just wanted to see how far I could go before someone noticed." Bernice's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes. I left without telling anyone. My staff panicked. Charles nearly called the police. But I needed to know if the world still had kindness in it." His voice dropped, rough with confession. "When you stopped, I got my answer." Bernice sat very still, unsure whether to speak. You could have frozen. I would have, if not for you. He leaned back in his chair. That's why I asked Charles to find you. I wanted to thank you properly. You don't have to, she said quickly. You were cold, and well, anyone decent would have done the same. He tilted his head. You give the world too much credit, Ms. Lavender. I was out there for hours. Cars passed. People stared. But only you stopped. She swallowed, her throat tightening. I did what my mother taught me. She raised you well. Silence fell again, but it wasn't uncomfortable this time. The fire murmured softly, and through the tall windows, the snow continued its patient descent. Finally, Kevin reached into a small wooden box on the table beside him and pulled out a thin, folded envelope. He extended it toward her. What's this? An apology from the world, he said. And maybe a beginning. Bernice hesitated, then unfolded it. Inside was a check, not a fortune, but more money than she'd ever seen in one place. Enough to pay back rent, clear her bills, maybe buy Charles that new backpack he'd been eyeing. Mr. Peebles, I can't. You can, he said firmly. And you will. Consider it a repayment. You gave me something priceless, Faith. Let me return the gesture in the only way I know how. Tears blurred her vision. I don't know how to thank you. You already did. She folded the check carefully, tucking it into her coat pocket like it might fly away if she wasn't careful. Kevin smiled, his voice softening again. Would you and Charles join me for dinner tomorrow night? It's quiet here most evenings. The company would do an old man good. Bernice hesitated. Are you sure? I insist, he said. Bring your boy. There's plenty of room. She stood slowly. Then we'll be here. As she turned to leave, Kevin's voice stopped her. Bernice? Yes, sir. He was looking at the scarf draped over the chair beside him, the gray one she'd given him that night. You know, he said thoughtfully, my wife used to say kindness is like a scarf. It wraps around you once, but the warmth lasts long after you give it away. Bernice smiled through her tears. She sounds like someone I would have liked. She would have liked you too, Kevin said quietly. Outside, the snow had started falling again, heavier this time. Charles Rivers walked her to the car. Before she got in, he paused. He hasn't been this clear in months, he said. Whatever you did, it reached him. I didn't do anything, Bernice replied. I just stopped. He nodded, closing the car door gently. Sometimes that's all it takes. As they drove back down the hill, Bernice looked once more at the mansion glowing behind her. The lights shimmered through the snow, golden and unreal. She touched the envelope in her pocket. For the first time in a long time, the world didn't feel entirely against her. But as the car neared the city again, her phone vibrated on her lap. Unknown number, Ms. Lavender, this is Channel 9 News. We'd like to ask about your relationship with Mr. Kevin Peebles. Can you comment? Her heart dropped. She stared out the window, at the hill vanishing behind fog, and whispered, what now? A private act of kindness has gone public, and the world is watching. By the next morning, Baltimore had a new rumor. The story was everywhere before Bernice even woke up. Janitor single mom befriends elderly billionaire, family fears he's being scammed. It was on the radio while Miss Alma made breakfast, on the cafe TV by the laundromat, and on the phone screens of strangers who didn't know her name yesterday but suddenly had opinions about her face. Bernice's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. You're trending, girl, Tisha texted, followed by a link and a row of shocked emojis. Don't read the comments, Miss Alma warned, but it was too late. They called her names. They called her a fraud. They called her a gold digger. And someone even wrote, "These people always have a hustle." She put the phone face down on the table, the screen lighting her shaking hands from below. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. Miss Alma sipped her tea. "You didn't. But when you do right in front of a world that prefers wrong, they'll still find fault in your reflection." By noon, a dark sedan waited outside Miss Alma's building again. This time, the driver didn't honk. He just stepped out and opened the rear door, calm as a sermon. "Mr. Peebles would like to see you," Charles Rivers said. "He's aware of the noise." Bernice hesitated. "The noise?" He gave a small, knowing nod. "Come. Bring your son." The gates of Willow Hill opened wide this time, almost like they were expecting her. The long driveway glistened from the morning thaw. Inside, the mansion buzzed with a quiet tension. Reporters had tried to drive up earlier, but the staff had turned them away. Kevin Peebles sat in the conservatory, sunlight pooling on the marble floor around him like warm water. "Bernice," he said, his voice calm, measured. "You've seen the headlines?" She nodded, holding Charles's hand tighter. "I swear, I didn't." He raised a hand. "I know you didn't. The world is restless. It fills silence with suspicion." Then he looked down at Charles, who peeked from behind her coat. "You must be the famous Charles. I hear you like pancakes." The boy's eyes widened. "How'd you know?" Kevin smiled. "I know things about people who matter." The tension cracked into a soft laugh. For the first time all morning, Bernice breathed. They sat for an hour, talking like old friends. Kevin listened, really listened, while Bernice explained how she'd lost her job, her apartment, her dignity in a single week. He listened without interruption, without pity. Then he said quietly, "What happened to you isn't Charity's concern, Bernice. It's Justice's." That night, he made her an offer, help him create something new, a fund for working single parents who fall through the cracks. He'd call it the Lavender Initiative, after her. Bernice blinked. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I can," he said. "And you'll run it with me. We'll start small, Baltimore first, then maybe DC next year. I have money. You have heart. Together, we might make sense of this world." She tried to protest, she was just a janitor, not an organizer, not anyone, but he waved it off. "You've already proven you know what people need. You stop when others don't." Weeks later, the initiative found its first home in a refurbished office beside a youth shelter. Bernice worked late nights again, but this time it was different. There was heat in the rooms, laughter in the halls, purpose in the tired. Charles drew crayon signs for the entrance, bright purple hearts with words like help and hope. The media still lurked, but Kevin refused to hide. He gave one interview, just one, standing beside Bernice on the marble steps of Willow Hill. "This woman saved my life," he told the cameras. "Not with money, but with humanity. And humanity is something we all seem to have misplaced." The clip went viral. 1,000 people shared it with captions like, "Faith in humanity restored." But online kindness, like winter sunlight, never stays long. A week later, a gossip blog posted pictures of Bernice walking with Kevin into a bank, claiming she was manipulating a lonely old man. Then came the fake receipts, the twisted stories, the grainy screenshots. A lie travels faster than the truth ever learns to run. One night, Bernice came home from the foundation to find Charles sitting on the couch, face buried in his arms. "What's wrong, baby?" He looked up, tears wetting his cheeks. A kid at school said you're stealing from Mr. Peebles. The words hit harder than any winter wind. Bernice knelt, pulling him close. Hey. Look at me. Do I look like someone who steals? He sniffled. No. Then don't let lies teach you about truth. Truth doesn't shout. It stands still until the noise dies. He nodded, and for a second, he smiled again. But after she tucked him into bed, she sat in the dark, staring at her phone screen as the notifications stacked higher and uglier. Her reflection in the glass looked like someone she didn't recognize. At Willow Hill, Kevin was awake, too. He sat at his desk, reading through the same headlines, fury shaking his frail hands. Charles Rivers hovered nearby. Should we release a statement? The driver asked. Kevin looked up, his eyes suddenly sharp. No. We'll release the truth. The next morning, a video appeared on his verified account, no press release, no polish. Just the billionaire, sitting by his fireplace, his voice steady but burning. Her name is Bernice Lavender. She's a single mother who stopped when others didn't. She didn't ask for fame or fortune, she asked for decency. And if you can't recognize goodness when it stands in front of you, perhaps the blindness isn't hers. He paused, eyes wet. If you think she's after my money, you're wrong. She already gave me what money could never buy, peace. The video hit 2 million views overnight. The hate quieted. The noise shifted, some in apology, most in shame. Bernice didn't cry when she saw it. She just whispered, he didn't have to do that. Miss Alma smiled through her own tears. He did, baby. That's what real people do when the world turns its back, they turn it right again. Later that week, the mayor's office called. The Lavender Initiative was being honored for community impact. Bernice stood on stage beside Kevin, who leaned on his cane, his hand trembling just slightly when he reached for hers. I hope you know, he whispered, none of this would exist without you. She shook her head. You gave it life. He smiled. You gave it reason. The cameras flashed. Applause rolled through the hall. For the first time in months, Bernice felt weightless. But later that night, after the event, she noticed Kevin's hand shaking worse than usual, his eyes dimming behind the glow of the chandeliers. Are you all right? She asked. He smiled faintly, as if knowing something she didn't. I'm just tired, my dear. The kind of tired that feels final. She frowned. Maybe we should call the doctor. He squeezed her hand, voice low. Promise me you'll keep the light burning, Bernice. No matter what they say, no matter what happens next. Her throat tightened. I promise. Kevin nodded, eyes misty. Good. Then everything I've built still means something. That night, a storm rolled over Baltimore. Thunder cracked through the sky as lightning lit the windows of Willow Hill. And in the brief flash of white, Bernice saw Kevin's reflection still by the fire, unmoving. Rain hammered the city like a slow drumbeat. Each drop slid down the mansion windows at Willow Hill like tears the sky couldn't hold back. It was 3:17 a.m. when Bernice's phone buzzed on her nightstand. Charles Rivers, it's Mr. Peebles, you should come. Now. She didn't think, she moved. Coat, shoes, scarf. Her son stirred. Mom. Go back to sleep, baby. Mommy just needs to check on a friend. The cab's headlights carved tunnels through the storm. The driver said nothing, he didn't have to. Bernice sat forward, gripping the seatbelt with white knuckles, whispering silent prayers she didn't know she still remembered. When the gates of Willow Hill appeared, they were already open. Inside, the house glowed dim and solemn. The fire that usually roared in the parlor was down to quiet embers. The air smelled faintly of medicine and rain-soaked wood. Charles Rivers met her at the doorway. His voice was calm, but his eyes were red. "He's in the study." Bernice's steps were soft, reverent. The same hall she'd first walked weeks ago now felt sacred, like walking through the pages of a story that was coming to its end. Kevin Peebles sat by the fire, just as he always did. His favorite gray scarf, the one she'd given him, was draped across his lap. His eyes were half open, as though he'd been waiting for her. The doctor looked up when Bernice entered, then quietly closed his bag. "He went peacefully," he said. "Fell asleep about an hour ago." The words hit like a soft, shattering wave. Bernice stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. He's gone." Charles nodded once. "He asked for you before he closed his eyes." Her knees nearly gave way. She sank to the armrest of his chair, tears slipping freely now, no longer held back by pride or composure. The room hummed with silence, the kind that carries memory instead of noise. On the table beside him lay a letter, sealed with a trembling hand. Her name written in neat, deliberate strokes, Bernice Lavender. Charles handed it to her. "He said you'd know when to open it." The letter. "My dear Bernice. By the time you read this, I will have gone where Eleanor has been waiting all these years. Don't mourn me too hard. I lived a good life, and in my last days, I saw what real goodness looks like. The world taught me to count things, shares, profits, buildings, but you reminded me to weigh things instead, kindness, courage, decency. They tipped the scale every time. I've arranged for Willow Hill to be turned into a community refuge, a place where single parents and displaced workers can rebuild. Charles Rivers will oversee the paperwork, but the heart of it belongs to you. Call it whatever you wish. I imagine you'll make it beautiful. And one more thing, the scarf you gave me, keep it close. It was never mine to begin with. With gratitude beyond measure. Kevin Peebles." Bernice pressed the letter to her chest and wept quietly. Charles Rivers placed a hand on her shoulder and said nothing. He didn't need to. The storm outside began to break. The thunder rolled into a distant murmur, and dawn began to bruise the horizon. When she finally stepped outside, the air was cold but gentle. The snow had melted into silver puddles that reflected the gray of the sky. She stood there for a long while, watching the first light stretch over the mansion, the home that was no longer his but would forever carry his name. 1 year later. The sign out front read the Peebles Lavender Foundation in bold gold letters. The gates stood open now, every morning, welcoming anyone who needed warmth, a meal, or a place to start again. Children laughed in the courtyard. Volunteers unpacked boxes of donated clothes. And Bernice, once a janitor scrubbing hallways for a paycheck, now directed a team of 10 full-time staff. She wore a simple cream blouse and that same gray scarf around her shoulders, faded but warm. Charles, now 8, helped stack food trays with a grin. "Mom! Look," he shouted, pointing to a framed photo on the wall, Kevin, smiling faintly in his chair, with Bernice and him standing beside him. She smiled back, her eyes misty. "Yeah, baby. That's our friend." Visitors often asked how it all began, how a billionaire and a janitor's paths crossed. Bernice always gave the same answer. "Because one night, I stopped." And that was the truth. As dusk fell that evening, Bernice walked to the garden behind the mansion. The tulips, Eleanor's tulips, had returned, just like Kevin said they would. Their red petals glistened under the amber light, fragile but fierce against the chill. She knelt, brushing snow from one bloom. You kept your promise, old man, she whispered. Now it's my turn to keep mine. The wind picked up, soft and warm, fluttering her scarf around her shoulders like a blessing. She closed her eyes, letting it wrap her in peace. That night, Bernice sat at her desk and wrote the first line of a speech she'd give at the next foundation gala. Kindness doesn't wear suits or smell like money. It wears janitor gloves, carries grocery bags, and still finds time to stop for a stranger. She smiled, whispering Kevin's favorite words under her breath. Wealth means nothing when love is forgotten. Outside, the mansion lights glowed across the hill, soft, golden, eternal. And somewhere, beyond sight but not beyond feeling, Kevin Peebles' voice seemed to echo on the wind. You did good, Bernice. You kept the light burning. She looked up, smiled, and whispered back. Always. In a world that rushes past pain, be the one who stops. You may just save a life, and find your own purpose along the way. Talent doesn't wear designer suits. Sometimes, it wears yellow gloves and carries a mop.